Montana Territory, 1875. The unforgiving wilderness of the American West stretched before Fiona Montgomery like an endless canvas of danger and solitude. At 22, she had already learned the harsh lessons that most folks took a lifetime to understand. Trust was a luxury, and attachments were burdens that could break you when the world inevitably took them away. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Fiona worked her small vegetable garden beside the modest cabin her father had built before the influenza took him last winter. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her faded blue calico dress had seen better days, but there was an undeniable grace in how she moved, a quiet strength that belied her slender frame. "Talking to those plants won't make them grow any faster," she muttered to herself, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. The lonely habit of speaking aloud had developed in the months since her father's passing. The homestead felt too quiet otherwise. 3 miles from the nearest neighbor and 15 from the settlement of White Rock Creek, Fiona had made peace with her isolation. It was safer this way. The frontier had already taken everything she loved: her mother during the journey west, her father to illness, and her brother James to a dispute over cattle with rustlers 2 years back. Love and connection only gave the cruel frontier more weapons to use against you. "No point in wishful thinking," she said firmly, pushing away the ache of loneliness that sometimes crept into her chest on quiet evenings. She had her land, her small herd of cattle, and enough skill with her father's Winchester to keep predators, both four-legged and two-legged, at bay. That was all anyone could really count on in this territory. The distant sound of thrashing and panicked shouts pulled Fiona from her thoughts. She straightened, listening carefully as the cries came again, more desperate this time. Without hesitation, she dropped her garden tools and sprinted toward the house, emerging moments later with her rifle and a length of rope slung over her shoulder. Following the sounds, she ran toward the north pasture where the land dipped down toward Willow Creek. The spring thaw had turned portions of the normally placid creek banks into treacherous mud traps, quicksand that could swallow a horse or a careless traveler without warning. As she crested the small rise, Fiona's breath caught in her throat. 2 young Sioux boys, neither more than 12 years old, were trapped in the quicksand near the creek bed. One was already sunk to his waist, panic evident in his wide eyes and frantic movements. The second boy was reaching for his friend, only to find himself slowly sinking as well. For a fleeting moment, caution whispered in Fiona's ear. Relations with the Sioux had been tense since the gold rush brought more settlers streaming into their traditional hunting grounds. Stories of raids and reprisals traveled quickly across the territory. But the terror in the children's eyes spoke a universal language that transcended any frontier politics. Without further hesitation, Fiona raced down the slope. "Stop struggling," she called out, gesturing with her hands when they looked at her with confusion. "The more you fight, the faster you sink." She quickly tied her rope to a sturdy cottonwood and tossed the free end toward the boy who was sunk the deepest. When he grabbed hold, she braced herself and began to pull, her muscles straining against the suction of the mud. Slowly, painfully, the earth released its grip, and the boy emerged from the quicksand. Once he was on solid ground, they worked together to rescue his friend. The boys were shaking, covered in mud, but alive. They spoke rapidly to each other in their native language, casting uncertain glances at Fiona. She offered them water from her canteen and clean cloths to wipe away the worst of the mud. "You're safe now," she said gently, knowing they probably understood little of her words, but hoping her tone conveyed her meaning. "You need to be careful around the creek after the thaw." The older of the 2 boys nodded solemnly, then spoke a few words that Fiona recognized as thanks from the limited Sioux phrases she had learned from a traveling missionary. They disappeared into the trees minutes later, running with the resilient energy of youth, leaving Fiona to wonder about their tribe's camp and whether she had just invited trouble to her doorstep. 3 days passed without incident, and Fiona had almost forgotten about the boys when she spotted a dust cloud approaching from the north. Her heart raced as she counted at least 20 mounted warriors appearing on the horizon. The entire Sioux hunting party was headed directly for her homestead. "So this is how it ends," she whispered, reaching for her rifle, even as she acknowledged the futility of resistance against such numbers. But as the warriors drew closer, she noticed the 2 boys riding beside a tall, imposing man whose elaborate headdress marked him as a chief. The boys were pointing toward her, animated in their storytelling. Rather than weapons, the warriors carried what appeared to be bundles. The meeting that followed changed everything Fiona thought she knew about survival on the frontier. Through a mixture of broken English, gestures, and the surprising translation skills of a young warrior named Running Fox, the chief explained that the boys were his nephews. He had come not for vengeance, but to honor the woman who had saved them from certain death. "You show courage," the chief said through Running Fox. "Our people value this. You alone, yet you help our children." The bundles contained gifts, intricately tanned hides, dried meat that would sustain her through winter, and beautiful beadwork that represented hours of skilled labor. But most valuable was the chief's declaration that her homestead would be respected by all in his tribe. In a territory where alliances meant survival, this unexpected friendship was worth more than gold. As the Sioux prepared to depart, Running Fox approached Fiona. "Chief asks if you need help with anything before we go." "As thanks." Fiona hesitated, then gestured toward her struggling cattle herd, depleted after the harsh winter. "I could use help rounding up some strays that wandered into the northern valley. But it's too much to ask." The chief nodded once after hearing the translation, and 5 warriors, including Running Fox, remained behind as the others departed. In 2 days of working together, communication barriers fell away, replaced by a mutual respect that transcended words. On the evening before the warriors planned to rejoin their tribe, a storm blew in from the mountains. As Fiona and her unexpected allies huddled in her cabin, the sound of approaching horses cut through the drumming rain. Running Fox peered through the window, his posture immediately tensing. "Riders," he said grimly. "Not our people." Fiona's hand moved instinctively to her rifle. "How many?" "6. Maybe 7. His dark eyes met hers. "Bad men. I see guns." A cold dread settled in Fiona's stomach. Raiders had been plaguing isolated homesteads throughout the territory, taking advantage of the lawlessness of the frontier. Alone, she would have been defenseless. But tonight, she wasn't alone. The events that followed unfolded with terrifying swiftness. The raiders, not expecting to find Sioux warriors defending the homestead, were caught off guard. Warning shots fired into the air by Running Fox and his companions were enough to send the would-be attackers retreating into the storm. As the danger passed, Fiona found herself looking at Running Fox with new eyes. In the firelight, she noticed his strong profile, the intelligence in his gaze, the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. He was nothing like the savage caricatures described in penny novels or frightened settlers' tales. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate. He nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "You saved our boys. We save you. This is the way." The next morning, as the Sioux warriors prepared to depart, Running Fox lingered. "I will return," he said, the promise clear in his voice. "To check on you. Make sure you're safe." Fiona found herself hoping he would keep that promise, even as she tried to dismiss the unfamiliar warmth that spread through her chest at his words. True to his word, Running Fox returned a week later, alone this time. He brought news of buffalo herds to the north and offered to hunt for her winter stores. The pattern continued through the summer months, his visits becoming more frequent, their conversations deepening despite the language barrier. Under Running Fox's guidance, Fiona learned to identify edible plants she had overlooked, to track game more effectively, and to understand the subtle signs of changing weather that only those who had lived generations on the land could read. In return, she taught him English words, shared her books, and explained the strange customs of the white settlers. By the harvest moon, when Running Fox arrived with 2 horses loaded with fresh game, Fiona realized with startling clarity that she had begun to measure time by his visits. The days between felt longer, emptier. The realization terrified her. "You should not come again," she said abruptly as they finished hanging meat in her smokehouse. Running Fox went still, his expression carefully neutral. "Have I offended?" "No." Fiona twisted her hands in her apron. "But people will talk. A Sioux warrior visiting a white woman alone. It's dangerous. For both of us." "I am not afraid," he said simply. "Well, you should be." The words burst from her with unexpected force. "This territory isn't kind to people who don't follow its rules. I've lost everyone I've ever cared about to this wilderness. I won't. I can't. Cannot what?" Running Fox stepped closer, his gaze intent. "I can't watch you die too," she whispered, the admission costing her dearly. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Tomorrow, I go to Fort Laramie with others of my tribe. Treaty talks. When I return, we will speak of this fear you carry." But the world had other plans. 2 days after Running Fox's departure, a tall, lean cowboy named Clayton Garrett rode onto Fiona's property, the emblem of the territorial marshal's office gleaming on his chest. At 26, Clayton had the weathered look of a man who had seen far more than his years suggested, though his clean-shaven face maintained a youthful handsomeness that contrasted with the hardness in his hazel eyes. "Ma'am," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Deputy Marshal Clayton Garrett. I'm tracking raiders that hit the McAllister place 20 miles south. Thought you might have seen something, being out here alone." Fiona invited him in for coffee, grateful for news from beyond her small corner of the territory. Clayton's easy manner and straightforward talk reminded her of simpler times, before loss had taught her to keep the world at arm's length. "Dangerous country for a woman alone," he commented, his gaze sweeping appreciatively over her homestead. "You've done well here, though. Most impressive." "I manage," she replied, unwilling to mention her unusual alliance. Clayton stayed for supper, offering to repair her corral gate before departing. One visit became 2, then 3. Each time, he brought supplies from town or news of the territory. Unlike the rough cowboys and desperate prospectors who occasionally passed through, Clayton treated her with a respect that acknowledged her capabilities without challenging her independence. "My folks had a place near Cheyenne," he explained one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Lost it to drought and debts when I was 16. Been wearing this badge for 7 years now, trying to bring some order to this chaos." "Is that possible?" Fiona asked, thinking of all the territory had taken from her. "Taming the wilderness?" Clayton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's what I tell myself. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" As October painted the cottonwoods gold, Clayton became a regular visitor, and Fiona found herself watching the Eastern Trail for his approach. Running Fox had not returned from Fort Laramie, and with each passing day, worry gnawed at her. The newspapers Clayton brought spoke of complications at the treaty talks, of rising tensions and military preparations. "You shouldn't worry yourself about Indian affairs," Clayton said when he caught her reading the latest dispatch with furrowed brows. "Army will handle it. That's what they're there for." Fiona nodded noncommittally, unwilling to reveal how personally these Indian affairs affected her. Clayton represented law and order in the territory. What would he think of her friendship with Running Fox? There were laws against fraternizing with the tribes, unspoken rules that governed the delicate balance of frontier life. The first snow fell early that year, dusting the hills with white in mid-November. Fiona was chopping wood when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Expecting Clayton, she was unprepared for the sight of Running Fox, riding slowly, his normally proud posture slumped with exhaustion. She ran to meet him, alarming concern replacing propriety. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Running Fox dismounted stiffly, his face gaunt. "Treaty talks failed. Soldiers came. There was fighting." His eyes, usually so expressive, were distant. "Many dead. My cousin. 2 friends. We were separated from our people." "We?" Fiona looked past him, noticing for the first time the small group of women and children huddled on travois, pulled by weary horses. "Families of warriors who fought," Running Fox explained grimly. "Army will put them on reservation. Or worse, need safe place. Just for tonight. Tomorrow we find our people." The decision should have been difficult. Harboring hostiles was a hanging offense in some parts of the territory. But Fiona found herself already moving toward the travelers, gesturing toward her barn. "Bring them inside the house instead," she said firmly. "It's warmer. I'll put on soup." The relief in Running Fox's eyes pierced something deep inside her. This man who had always appeared so strong, so certain, was trusting her with the lives of his people. The weight of that trust was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The women and children, 7 in all, filed silently into Fiona's cabin. Their faces bore the marks of harsh travel and harsher circumstances, but they carried themselves with dignity. A small girl, no more than 4, stared up at Fiona with solemn dark eyes that held none of the innocence children her age should possess. Through the night, Fiona tended to minor injuries, served what food she could spare, and created pallets from spare blankets and quilts. Running Fox translated when necessary. But mostly they worked in companionable silence, their movements around each other as natural as if they had been partners for years. As the children finally succumbed to exhaustion, Running Fox joined Fiona by the fire. "Thank you," he said simply. "Anyone would have done the same," she replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. "No." He shook his head. "Most would turn us away. Or worse, send for soldiers." His gaze held her steadily. "You risk much for us. You would do the same for me." It wasn't a question. In the months of their unusual friendship, she had come to understand the core of who he was. Honorable, steadfast, true to his word. Running Fox reached out, his fingers brushing hers with a gentleness that belied his strength. "When we first met, I thought you strong because you live alone. Now I see you strong because you know when not to be alone." The moment hung between them, fragile and profound. Fiona felt the careful walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. The sound of approaching horses shattered the silence. Running Fox was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with the fluid grace of a predator. His expression darkened. "Riders. Many." Fiona joined him, peering through the frost-edged glass. Her blood ran cold as she recognized Clayton's tall figure at the head of at least a dozen armed men. "It's the deputy marshal," she whispered. "And a posse." Running Fox's hand moved to the knife at his belt, his eyes hard. "They come for us." "I don't know." But even as she spoke, Fiona knew there could be no other explanation. Someone must have seen Running Fox's group traveling toward her homestead. In these tense times, that would be enough to raise an alarm. "You must go," she said urgently, already moving to wake the sleeping families. "Take them out the back, toward the creek. The caves and the bluff will shelter you until they're gone." Running Fox caught her arm. "You come too. When they find you helped us, I'll handle Clayton," she interrupted. "Go." Quickly, the Sioux families moved with silent efficiency, gathering their few belongings and slipping out the back door into the pre-dawn darkness. Running Fox was the last to leave, his gaze lingering on Fiona's face as if memorizing every detail. "I will not forget this," he said softly. "Neither will I." The words felt inadequate for the storm of emotions raging within her. Then he was gone, a shadow melting into the night, and Fiona was left to face what was coming alone. Clayton's knock came minutes later, sharp and authoritative. Fiona took a moment to compose herself, rumpling her hair and clothes to suggest she had just risen from bed, before opening the door. "Deputy Garrett?" she asked, feigning surprise and sleepiness. "What brings you here at this hour?" Clayton's gaze was harder than she had ever seen it, his usual easy manner replaced by taut vigilance. Behind him, the posse sat astride nervous horses, their expressions ranging from grim determination to barely concealed bloodlust. "We're tracking a band of hostiles," Clayton said without preamble. "Sioux broke away from the reservation roundup. Trellis over at the trading post said he saw them headed this direction yesterday evening." Fiona widened her eyes in feigned concern. "Indians? Here? I've been alone all night, deputy. Haven't seen or heard anything unusual." Clayton studied her face, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Mind if we take a look around? Just to be sure you're safe." "Of course." She stepped back, praying that Running Fox and the others had left no obvious signs of their presence. The search was thorough and tense. Fiona followed Clayton through her home, her heart pounding painfully as he noted the multiple coffee cups on the table, the embers still warm in the hearth. "You said you were alone," he remarked, his tone neutral but his gaze sharp. "I was restless," she improvised. "Kept making fresh coffee. Bad habit when I can't sleep." In the barn, one of the posse members discovered a small beaded bracelet dropped by one of the children. He held it up triumphantly. "Engine work, Marshal. Fresh too." Clayton took the bracelet, turning it over in his hands before looking at Fiona. The disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than she had expected. "One of the Sioux warriors who helped me with my cattle months ago left it," she explained, the partial truth coming easily. "I've been meaning to return it next time I saw any of the tribe." "Helped you?" Clayton's voice hardened. "You've been consorting with Indians?" The word consorting carried ugly implications that made Fiona's cheeks burn. "They helped me when no one else would," she said firmly. "Not all of us have the luxury of choosing our allies out here." A tense silence fell between them. The posse members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. "Boss," one of them finally said, "tracks leading away from the house. Toward the creek." Clayton held Fiona's gaze for a long moment before nodding curtly. "Mount up," he ordered without looking away from her. "We'll follow them while the trail's fresh." The men filed out, leaving Clayton and Fiona alone in the yard. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and tight with controlled anger. "I thought you were different, Fiona. Thought you understood what we're trying to build out here. Civilization. Order. Safety. At what cost?" she challenged. "Those hostiles you're hunting include women and children whose only crime is being born Sioux. The law doesn't distinguish. Then the law is wrong," she cut in, straightening her spine. "And if enforcing it means hunting innocent people, then perhaps you're wrong too." Clayton's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake, siding with them against your own kind." "My kind abandoned me to survive alone on this homestead," Fiona replied evenly. "Running Fox and his people showed me more kindness than any settler ever has." Something shifted in Clayton's expression at the mention of Running Fox's name, a darkening, a hardening. "Running Fox," he repeated slowly. "The war chief's son? The one who led the raid on the Miller settlement last spring." Fiona's blood ran cold. "That's not possible. He was here with me when—" She stopped, realizing too late what she had revealed. Clayton's eyes narrowed in understanding. "So that's how it is," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "You and that savage. He's twice the man you are," Fiona shot back, anger overriding caution. "And he would never harm innocent settlers." Clayton stepped closer, his height allowing him to loom over her. "You don't know what he's capable of. What any of them are capable of. I've seen what they do to homesteads like yours. To women like you." A call from one of the posse members drew his attention. "We need to move, boss. Trail's getting cold." Clayton turned away, then paused. "I'm going to find them, Fiona. And when I do, I'll bring them to justice. All of them. Even your Running Fox." He mounted his horse in one fluid motion. "For your sake, stay here. Don't make me arrest you too when this is over." The posse thundered away, following the tracks toward the creek, leaving Fiona standing alone in her yard, her mind racing. She knew the caves in the bluff would hide Running Fox's group temporarily, but the posse would eventually find them. There was only one path forward. Moving quickly, Fiona saddled her horse, packed supplies, and retrieved her father's rifle. If Clayton and his men were following tracks toward the creek, she would take the ridge trail that paralleled it. Harder riding, but faster. She had to reach Running Fox first, warn him of the danger. The winter morning was blindingly bright as she rode, the sun reflecting off fresh snow. The ridge trail was treacherous, ice making the narrow path even more dangerous, but Fiona pushed on. Below, she could occasionally glimpse the posse following the creek bed, moving more slowly through the thick brush. She reached the caves ahead of Clayton's men, dismounting and scrambling up the rocky slope. "Running Fox," she called, her voice echoing against the stone. "You must go now." He appeared at the mouth of the largest cave, eyes widening at the sight of her. "Fiona? What happened?" "Posse's coming. They know you're here." She gestured urgently toward where she had left her horse. "There's a deer trail that leads north through the high country. If you leave now, you can reach it before they cut you off." Running Fox studied her face, then nodded sharply. Within minutes, the women and children were mounted, ready to travel. Running Fox approached Fiona, concern etching lines around his eyes. "You cannot go back," he said quietly. "The marshal saw you warn us. He will arrest you. Or worse." The truth of his words settled like a stone in Fiona's stomach. She had made her choice the moment she decided to help them escape. There was no going back to her solitary life on the homestead, to the careful isolation she had maintained. "Then I'll go with you," she said, the words feeling right even as they terrified her. Running Fox's expression softened. "The path will be hard. Dangerous. I know. Your people will say you have chosen enemies over kin." "You are my kin now," Fiona replied simply. "You and your people. The only ones who came when I needed help." The sound of hoofbeats in the distance spurred them to action. The group moved quickly up the deer trail, Fiona riding beside Running Fox, her heart pounding not with fear, but with a strange exhilaration. For the first time since losing her family, she felt part of something larger than herself. They had traveled less than a mile when shots rang out behind them. Clayton had found their trail faster than expected. Running Fox immediately directed the women and children to continue while he and the two other warriors prepared to hold off the pursuit. "Go with them," he told Fiona, his expression brooking no argument. "Keep them safe." "No." She drew her rifle from its scabbard. "I won't leave you." The look he gave her then, surprise melting into something deeper, more profound, nearly stole her breath. "Together, then," he said, a smile touching his lips despite the danger. They took positions among the rocks overlooking the trail, prepared to delay the posse long enough for the others to escape. The first riders appeared below them, Clayton in the lead, his face set in grim determination. Running Fox fired a warning shot that kicked up snow well in front of the posse. The riders pulled up sharply, scanning the slopes for the source of the shot. "That's far enough, Clayton," Fiona called out, her voice carrying clearly in the winter air. Clayton's head snapped up, his expression hardening when he spotted her among the rocks. "Fiona, stand down and come out. You don't want to be part of this." "I already am," she replied. "These people are under my protection. Turn back, and no one needs to get hurt today." A murmur ran through the posse at her words. Several men exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of firing on a white woman. Clayton dismounted, handing his reins to the man beside him. "You're making a mistake," he called up to her. "Whatever he's told you, whatever you think you owe him, it's not worth throwing your life away." "My life was already thrown away," Fiona answered, her voice steady. "Left alone on that homestead, told to be grateful just to survive. Running Fox showed me there's more to living than just not dying." Clayton's expression darkened. "So you'd betray your own people? Your own kind? For what? Some noble savage fantasy?" Running Fox tensed beside her, but Fiona placed a calming hand on his arm. "The only betrayal would be turning away from what I know is right," she called back. "These are families, Clayton. Children. They've done nothing wrong." "The law says different," Clayton insisted. "Then the law is wrong." Fiona repeated her earlier words with even more conviction. A tense silence fell. Several of the posse members shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. One muttered something to his neighbor and then abruptly turned his horse around, riding away. After a moment's hesitation, two others followed. Clayton watched them go, his jaw working angrily. When he turned back to Fiona, his expression had hardened into something unrecognizable. "Last chance, Fiona. Come down now, or you're as much an outlaw as they are." In answer, Fiona raised her rifle, aiming carefully at the snow beside Clayton's feet. The shot rang out, sending him jumping back. "Next one won't miss," she warned, though they both knew she was bluffing. Despite everything, she couldn't bring herself to shoot a man in cold blood, not even Clayton. What happened next unfolded with dreamlike slowness. Clayton drew his pistol, aiming not at Fiona but at Running Fox beside her. Without thinking, Fiona threw herself against Running Fox, knocking him aside just as the shot rang out. Pain exploded in her shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the ground. Running Fox's anguished cry mingled with shouts from below. Through a haze of pain, Fiona was vaguely aware of more gunfire, of Running Fox pulling her behind the shelter of a boulder, of his hands pressing against her wound to stem the bleeding. "Foolish woman," he murmured, his voice tight with fear. "Why did you do that?" "Couldn't let him hurt you," she managed, her vision swimming. "Too important." The firefight below intensified briefly, then fell suddenly silent. Fiona struggled to stay conscious, focusing on Running Fox's face above her. If these were to be her last moments, she wanted them filled with him. "Fiona." Clayton's voice carried up the slope. "Fiona, are you hurt? Let me help you." Running Fox tensed, reaching for his weapon, but Fiona caught his wrist weakly. "Wait," she whispered. "Listen. The rest of the posse is standing down." Clayton continued, his voice strained. "No one wants to see more blood spilled today, especially not yours." Cautiously, Running Fox peered around the boulder. "He stands alone," he reported quietly. "Others have backed away." "Let me come up," Clayton called, unarmed, just to see to her wound. Running Fox looked to Fiona, a question in his eyes. She nodded weakly. "Let him come." Minutes later, Clayton crested the ridge, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons. His face paled when he saw Fiona's blood-soaked sleeve, the pain etched in her features. "Jesus, Fiona," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. What were you thinking? That I couldn't watch someone else I care about die, she answered simply. Clayton's gaze flicked to Running Fox, who hovered protectively at Fiona's side, then back to her. Something in his expression shifted, resignation, perhaps, or understanding. The bullet went clean through, he said after examining her wound. Missed anything vital, from the looks of it. But she needs proper care, bandages, medicine for infection. Running Fox nodded grimly. Our healer is with the others. And our doctor is back in town. Clayton ran a hand through his hair in frustration. 15 miles, either direction. Fiona grasped both their hands weakly. Stop, she murmured. Both of you. This doesn't have to end in more bloodshed. The two men stared at each other over her prone form. Years of ingrained hostility warring with their shared concern for her. The posse won't follow if I tell them not to, Clayton finally said, the words clearly costing him. Take her to your healer. Get her that shoulder fixed. He swallowed hard. But this isn't over. The territory won't just forget about. The territory is changing, Fiona interrupted, her voice stronger than she felt. Maybe it's time the people in it changed too. As darkness fell that evening, Fiona lay in a small teepee, her shoulder bandaged by the Sioux healer's skilled hands. Running Fox sat beside her, his expression thoughtful as he stared into the small fire. Your martial friend, he said finally. He loves you. Fiona considered this. Perhaps, but not enough to see past what he's been taught to believe. Running Fox nodded slowly. And you? What do you believe now? That the frontier taught me the wrong lesson, she admitted. I thought it was showing me that connections bring only pain. That loving means losing. She reached for his hand, her fingers entwining with his. But the real lesson was that we survive because of each other, not despite each other. His grip tightened on hers. Among my people, we say no one owns the land. The land owns us all equally. Perhaps it is the same with hearts. Perhaps, she agreed softly. Though I think I may have given mine away entirely. The look he gave her then contained everything words could not express. Tenderness, wonder, and a fierce protectiveness that made her breath catch. Sleep now, he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Tomorrow, we reach our people. Begin again. Together, she whispered, the word of promise. Together, he agreed, sealing the vow with a gentle kiss to her forehead. 3 months later, as spring brought new life to the plains, Fiona stood beside Running Fox before the assembled members of his tribe. Her shoulder had healed, leaving only a small scar as a reminder of the choice she had made. Dressed in a beautiful deerskin dress the women had made for her, adorned with intricate beadwork that told the story of her bravery in rescuing the chief's nephews, she felt none of the isolation that had defined her former life. The ceremony joining them as husband and wife blended traditions, Sioux rituals of blankets and sacred smoke, alongside the simple vows Fiona remembered from her parents' stories of their own wedding. As Running Fox placed a necklace of blue beads around her neck, symbolizing her place in his heart and his tribe, Fiona felt the last of her walls crumble away. Later, as they sat together watching the celebration fires, a rider approached the camp. The sentries allowed him through, a lone white man, instantly recognizable to Fiona. Clayton dismounted slowly, his posture conveying he came in peace. He carried a bundle, which he presented to Fiona without preamble. Deed to your homestead, he explained gruffly. Signed over to you proper. Army wanted to confiscate it, but I convinced them otherwise. He glanced at Running Fox, then back to her. Thought you might want to keep it. In case things don't work out here. Fiona accepted the bundle, touched by the gesture despite everything that had happened between them. Thank you, Clayton. But this is my home now. He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Territory's changing, he said, echoing her words from months before. New treaties being worked out. Better terms for the tribes. It won't fix everything, but... He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. Just wanted you to know. And to see that you were all right. I am, Fiona assured him, her hand finding Running Fox's beside her. More than all right. As Clayton rode away, Running Fox drew her close. Your people have a saying, he murmured against her hair. That home is where the heart is. Fiona smiled, watching the women teaching their children, the elders telling stories around the fires, the life that continued undaunted despite all the hardships the frontier had imposed. In saving those two Sioux boys from the quicksand months ago, she had inadvertently saved herself from a far more insidious trap, the belief that love was a weakness the frontier would exploit. "My heart is here," she said simply. "So this is home." Running Fox's arms tightened around her as the evening star appeared above the plains. "Then we are both home at last."